This week on London Real, we have the British Formula One racing driver, Max Chilton.
And when you put the helmet on, the bullshit stops. You just get it on and then you go. Push the boundaries of technology in anything, it costs money. Tennis players, golfers, maybe out 5-6 hours a day practicing. I haven't been in a car for like 2 months, and then you're meant to get in it and be straight on the pace, driving a car at 220 miles an hour. And when I wake up every morning, I make sure I practice the lap 10 times in my head, so it's there, fresh in my mind, to then when I go to the track. The way I became a better person was not trying to become anyone else. You just try and become a better person of you.
London Real presents Max Chilton, Need for Speed.
Drive it like you stole it.
This week on the show, we have Max Chilton, who is a British racing driver, Formula One, good-looking, young, the kind of guy you might expect to come out of a Ron Howard movie. But that is where the comparisons stop, because Max, he's the new breed of racing driver. He's not the one that's out late partying. He's actually the guy that's training hard, that's thinking about the psychology and the mental fortitude necessary to be a top F1 driver, and he's one that really takes his career very seriously, very introspective, and I found him to be a very, very mature guy. One of my most favorite lines from the show, though, is when I asked him the best advice he'd ever received, and he said, "Drive it like you stole it," which I guess is what they say to each other out there when they want to know how far they should push it. And the other thing I found fascinating about Max is that he has OCD, which is the obsessive compulsive disorder, but he thinks it's actually an asset when it comes to being a racing driver, because it allows him to be sure that everything is handled when he goes out there to race, everything's in place and everything is prepared, and it just gives him that extra feeling that he knows he's going to be in control when he's going around the track at 220 miles per hour. The other thing I found fascinating is that much of his training is actually done in a simulator, since it's very expensive to actually run a car on the track. And so he actually doesn't get that much car time, which makes what he does even more difficult. So there you go. I think you're going to really enjoy this time with Max, and I can't wait to see him one day, winning the Monaco Grand Prix. That would make me very happy, and so I look forward to that very, very much. A lot of people have been asking me, they said, "Brian, what's this thing called the Academy?" And you're not alone if you're curious. The Academy is a gathering of 1,000 of the most hardcore London reelers around the world. We get together, we push each other to build better versions of ourselves, to upgrade our peer group, and really to get things done to accomplish our goals. And we do that via our online academy. We have coursework, we have bonus success secret content like today from Max Chilton. We've got meetups online and in person. You can even come down to London Real Studios and meet me. We have meetups once a month, so definitely check that out if you'd like. I put together a quick video to tell you a bit more about it. Check it out.
The entrepreneurial journey, it can be a lonely road. I push myself in so many areas, but you can't do it all yourself.
The thing about the Academy is, it's like, look, you have the ideas, you have the ability, you have the skill, and you have the sort of ambition for yourself. But when you have a group of people pulling you forward, it's so important.
Accountability is what's missing from most of the programs or any gurus or any internet mentor that I had before.
I wanted to get some accountability. I wanted to make myself accountable to a group, to you.
The reason we started the Academy is because I felt like we were doing these amazing talks, like we'd have a Peter Sage episode or a Dan Pena episode or a Kala or someone, and you get super inspired, and then YouTube stops, and then you go back to your life and you don't make any changes. And it was just like, it felt like, what are we doing? If you're designing your life right, the good times are now. And in a few years, you'll look back and say, wow, that was amazing.
The thing about the Academy is it has so many different sort of layers to it. I think your web seminars are awesome. the way you broke it down and the style of your teaching is pretty awesome.
I like the feed. When I have to motivate myself, I kind of look at others struggling and getting over those struggles. So I actually follow daily the feed.
Best feature would be the sort of Facebook aspect of it, the social media aspect of it, as in creating a profile with your goals, your dreams.
Everyone's on the same vibe, and we may be at different stages in our journeys, but everyone's on the same page at the end of the day. Everyone's really trying to push themselves and building the best you. It really resonates with me.
And the fact that I'm committing a small amount of money and the fact that I'm actually trying to interact with those people means that I'm invested and means that I will keep it for the long run.
You have to be serious about yourself and what you want to achieve. And if you're serious about yourself, this is going to be such a fantastic platform.
London Real, sponsored by Bulletproof. This is London Real. I am Brian Rose. My guest today is Max Chilton, a British racing driver who made his Formula One debut in 2013, racing for the Marussia F1 team. During your first season, you broke the world record for the most consecutive finishes by a rookie driver, completing 19 out of 19 races. This year, you took part in the Le Mans 24-hour race and won your debut at the Ovals in Iowa in America, a notoriously difficult race for British drivers. You've done all this at the ripe old age of 24 years. Max, welcome to London Real.
Wow, sounds like you've done my story. Right, let's go.
That's it, you're done, right?
Yeah, you said all the highlights.
You know, you're our first racing driver here, and I'm actually here to learn a bit more about the sport myself. I follow it here, I follow it there, kind of like how you follow the UFC. When there's something big, I pay attention. So I got some questions for you, but we all, I think, are brought up with racing from the movies. I'm sure you watch movies when you're a kid. I was trying to think of the racing movies I've seen. It's probably Days of Thunder, you know, Tom Cruise, and I know that's stock car racing. We'll get to that. You know, the documentary Senna was very good. Rush was the recent one by Ron Howard, and it was kind of based in Britain, a lot of that. Talladega Nights, okay, that's a more comedic version. But did you grow up on racing movies? Was that always part of something that got you interested in it?
Never the racing movies. It was always spending my childhood in the playroom, as I called it. It was just a family living room on a Sunday. We'd have a roast usually, and then the Grand Prix would be on, and I'd listen to Murray Walker going, "It's go, 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 lights are out." And I'd usually watch this red car just dominate, and that was Michael Schumacher. So he's my idol. You know, a lot of people, you know, treat Senna as idol, but to be honest, I appreciate what he did, but I don't ever remember him racing because I was only just born when he sadly passed away. So to me, Schumacher was my idol, and I remember watching most Sundays this red car winning, and that's where I got my buzz from to take part in it. But it was many years later that I actually started taking part in motor racing in a championship in England and cadets for 8-year-olds.
Okay, so it was like 4, 5, 6 years old. You just were watching that on the television. And it was Schumacher. Yeah,
it was always this red car winning, and you know, it was the Ferrari at the time. He had many years of just continuously winning, and it might have not been the best thing to watch. But when you're a kid, you hate losing. All you want to do is win. So he was the one to beat, and you know, I loved him from that moment. And it was whenever that was, I was 8 when my brother started racing. And I had to go in the paddock, watch him race, and I loved the sound, the smell of the fuels, the smoking of the tyres. And it was about 6 months later that I got the chance to go have a go on a go-kart, because that was the only thing I could do at that age. And that's where a lot of people in Formula One started. Probably 80% started was in go-karts. That's where you learn your racecraft. I always think people who start karting, I can look at sort of Lewis Hamilton's driving style in karting, and it's still the same now in Formula One. You learn your craft in karting, but then you then adapt that as you go through into the major, single-seater categories all the way up to Formula One.
Senna was a karter as well, right?
Yeah.
And in that movie, there's a point at the end of the movie where he says, I think back to that day when I was, karting, but pretty high level karting. And he said it was all about the racing. And he's like, I miss that because it became all about the money and the sponsorships. But he's like, I miss that time when it was just the guys on the basic karts trying to win.
Yeah. Karting is a great place to start out. It's more of a level playing field than Formula One, for example, because most people have the same karts. There's different chassis and different engines, but there's minimal difference. In Formula One, everyone's got very different machinery, and it's very much a sort of an unfair playing field. So that's why a lot of people best memories being a racing driver is karting, because it was a really close, every corner you're being overtaken or you're overtaking someone else, and it's constant action from the green flag to the checkered flag. And I think when you're starting off with racing, it's a real shock to the system. And so you sort of remember that. And I know some of the greatest moments of my life are in karting, whether I won or lost.
Shock to the system, why? The turns, the danger, the G-forces, the what? What's shocking?
It's the noise and the speed. When I started, I was 8 years old. That was the youngest you could start back then. It's now younger. And you're in a thing which, is not much bigger than this chair. But, 8 years old, that thing can do 40 miles an hour. And you've got 25 others around you on a grid, all pushing each other down to the first corner with the smoke of the engines. Everyone's heart rates are shooting up. Everyone wants to beat someone else, and it's just the adrenaline rush is crazy. I was so much more nervous karting, at the start of a race in karting than I was at my first Grand Prix in Melbourne in 2013.
You said that when you see Lewis Hamilton, you can see his driving style from kind of the karting days. Is a great driver born, or is he made?
Bit of both. Everyone has a natural ability. You have to practice. No one's just going to get in a car and be the best driver in the world. So you do have to learn. But I think when everyone did the same number of hours of learning, there would be better drivers than others, and you can see that. Formula One's not the best for that because, as I said, you have to be in the best car. I think Alonso is one of the best drivers on that grid, but this year he's near the back in the McLaren because it's just not up to speed.
Okay.
So that was it's sort of a good thing for a lot of drivers because it proves to the wider audience, maybe people that aren't so into motorsport, can understand that you sort of have to have the car to do the job. But the driver does make the difference, and so you're up against your teammate mainly in Formula One.
Okay. And when you were 8 years old, people aren't telling you exactly how to drive out there. It's really you're learning yourself. Okay, I took that corner too hard, not hard enough, I missed this. I mean, is it a lot of self-teaching then, or do you get help along the way?
Karting, most people have their mechanic that look after the kart, but then they're on the side of the track whilst you're going around practice, racing, qualifying, whatever it may be, timing you. And they can see a lot of the track because kart tracks aren't particularly big. You could have a kart track in a very big car park. And so they can see if you're missing your apex or you're going in too tight or going in too wide. And so even your, not engineer, that's in motorsport now, but mechanics in karting have a good racing knowledge. A lot of them have done karting in their, when they were younger. And so they guide you. I did have a driver coach, probably half the grid have a driver coach as well. So you do get taught, but when you're driving, you're the best one to learn because you're there in the moment. You can see, I missed my apex. I need to make sure I get that next lap because, if you miss an apex by half a metre in a go-kart, that will affect your speed down the straight by maybe 2 miles an hour. But that momentum will then cost you a half a second on a lap. And if you're losing half a second lap over 30 laps, you're 15 seconds down the road. So it's very much about attention to detail.
And that is what racing is all about, right? It's all about microseconds.
Yeah. Millimeters, not millimeters, it's tenths of a second can split 10 cars over a 4 or 5 mile lap. So if you can just improve by 100th each corner, then you're going to find tenths of seconds, which will then put you up the grid 5-6 cars. So it's really, really close. And sometimes you can't feel the difference. Sometimes you go, that was a good lap, and you look at your time and it wasn't as good as the previous lap. It is sometimes very hard, But when you're really in the moment and you're really settled with the car and the track, you can notice. I can tell you if I'm half a tenth or half a tenth slower.
Right. Do you ever think that you're going to be replaced someday by a computer? You know, by something with all the different gimbals?
It's on its way. It is on its way. There's a championship called Formula E, which is quite futuristic, shall you say. It's all electric powers. The car is, hasn't got any electrical, hasn't got any combustion engine in it. It's just purely electric. The issue they have at the moment is they can't get it to last long enough. So they have to do a pit stop during the race, change cars into a car which is fully charged, and then go again. And these cars now do 120, 130 miles an hour. But the problem for me is you don't get that noise. I remember when I went for my first Formula One race, it makes your ears sort of bleed. The old V10s were just definitely, you could be 5 miles from the track stuck in traffic and you could hear the cars. Now it's sort of being reduced, and with Formula E there's no noise apart from a bit of gearbox noise. But they've just announced that they're going to have next year a completely driverless championship, which is on the route to what you were mentioning earlier.
Right, but people watch racing for the personalities, right? I mean, they watch it to see what's going on and who does what, maybe.
Yeah, no, you do. Motorsport's weird because you've got a helmet on, so you can't really see the person, but you can sense what a personality is like of a driver, the way they drive. And I think that's what makes the sport so special is most of the time you don't know the person that well, but then when they win the race and they take the helmet off, you can see who they are, and it's more of a shock to the system.
Right, and then you can equate the personality to the driving type, and it starts to make sense.
Yeah, completely. I can if you gave 2 drivers blank helmets and put them around a tight corner or a high speed corner in Formula One, I could probably tell you which teammate is who. Just because of the way they turned in or the aggressiveness of their driving. Okay.
Let's talk about the money. I think there was a figure that came out last year saying that Red Bull had spent like $1.2 billion on their Formula One piece, and someone else had thrown that figure out that it costs a company like $1 billion in total to actually fund, a Formula One car. Is that true? Is it because it's like the crew and the cars and the travel and in a circuit, there's a lot of travel. There's a lot of racing going on. That's a lot of money.
It is. It's definitely not a cheap sport. It is a glamorous sport. It's a really sort of futuristic, modern sport where they're pushing the boundaries of technology. So to push the boundaries of technology in anything, it costs money. And the manufacturers like Mercedes, Red Bull aren't really a manufacturer, but they're one of the the highest spending teams. They can spend huge numbers in dollars, pounds, whatever it may be, on developing these cars. I don't know the exact figures. They sound a little bit high to me, but it's not cheap for sure. Considering there's only two cars on the track per team, say they are spending 500 million a year. That's 250 million per car. And back at the factories, these top teams have, they should be capped, but maybe 1,200 people. So you've got 600 people for each car, which is just crazy because you can't imagine another sport where it was like that. You can't imagine a Tour de France team having 800 people behind it. It's a bizarre sport, but they're very highly tuned machines. Everything is custom made, and it has to be the best of the best. And so that takes a person per part on the car to make the best car in the world.
What do you love the most about it? Is it the fact that you're pushing the edge of technology, like really pushing these machines to places you didn't know they were going to go before, and shaving time off here, over there? Or is it just the competitiveness of it? Is it that you're pushing yourself every time you get in that car?
Yeah, it's pushing yourself. The thing that annoys me is how it's sometimes not a level playing field. The bit which drivers really enjoy is when they're in a car which is quick and you're driving it to the best you physically can, because a good car handles well. You can then drive it even better, and then you win and you feel like you're getting the most out of yourself. It is a frustrating sport at times, but it makes it really, really rewarding when you beat everyone else.
Right.
And it's a very weird sport in the way that cricketers or tennis players, golfers, maybe out 5-6 hours a day practicing. I haven't been in a car for like 2 months, and then you're meant to get in it and be straight on the pace, driving a car at 220 miles an hour around a corner, which each track has different grip levels. Whether it's hot or cold, you have different amounts of downforce, and you're meant to perfect it. It's a really hard sport for the amount of hours we actually get to practice.
But you can't practice because it costs money to practice.
Yeah, and it's all over the world. These tracks aren't just on your doorstep. There's in the World Championships, there's one track that we go to in all of the countries that we visit. And you have to fly the cars there, you have to fly all the machinery and telemetry and personnel. This huge organisation. You can't just go out every day testing. It's not the way it is. So it's a hard sport, and that's why the sport is pushing these technologies with simulations, because these simulators now are very, very good at replicating what it's like in real life.
I heard you say the simulator is almost just as good. And when you get in that thing, they're very, very realistic.
They are very, very realistic. And the thing is when you're actually in it, when you first get in it for the first time, you think, oh, this isn't quite right, because it's giving you different cues from the real car. But when you actually spend an hour in that simulator, because each simulator is different, if you learn the cues that it's feeding you, by the time that you've learned that, you're then down to driving the lap that you pretty much will in real life, and then it becomes really realistic. And you can only put a good time in if you're a very good driver. It's the same as real life. It does take a little bit of time because obviously it's not the real thing. But they are very, very accurate, and they can try a setup change with different springs, roll bars, downforce levels on the simulator. Then they can go to the track and try it, and it should be right. And so a lot of teams now have a guy or a professional racing driver in their simulator back at their factory, whilst they're racing in, say, Australia, out on track at the same time, and they say, oh, we need to check if this setup change works. And they have someone in the other side of the world testing it. If it works, then they'll put it straight onto the car and test it live. So they're
like
that
a drone.
accurate. They are that accurate, yeah.
Wow. And you say not level playing field. You talked about McLaren earlier, but they've got the money. But you're saying this year they have a bad car, or they just don't. Things aren't clicking for them. So it's not about the driver anymore. But they have the money.
They have the money. They probably haven't got the most out of the top 3-4 teams. And you do go in and out of cycles. You look at Chelsea, the best team I think in the world at a point, and now they're struggling to stay up. That is sort of like all sports are like that. You have your good days and bad days. McLaren at a time were the best. They're now going through a redevelopment phase. They've just brought Honda on, which is their first year. That's a really hard thing to do, and that's why they're struggling. But I guarantee you, in the next few years, they'll be right back up there again, and Mercedes might drop down. It's very hard to stay at the top, and so everything goes in cycles. But with Formula One, you can only do what the car will allow you to do, and that's why Jenson Button, world champion, Fernando Alonso, world champion, they are limited to what that car can do this year, and they've been fighting with Mauritius cars at the back in some races, which is 4 seconds a lap slower than the cars at the top where McLaren used to be a few years ago.
Okay. Are you going to be back in F1 next year? What's the plans? Is that somewhere you want to go? And then when it comes to people in F1, is Lewis Hamilton kind of the model for an up-and-coming young driver to kind of look to that, or not?
I'm not writing off Formula 1. If I got offered a good car, I'd jump at it for sure. It's the pinnacle of motorsport. It's where I've always dreamt to be. I still dream to be world champion, or at least win a Formula 1 race. But you have to be realistic. I spent 2 years in a car which was very difficult to even get points. Jules, my ex-teammate, only did it in one race out of the team being in the championship for 5 years. So it was really hard to do, and that's hard. You're training all day to be as fit as you can. You're working as hard as you can, and you've got other drivers flying past you who might not be trying as hard. And
because
so that's
technology is limiting you.
Because the technologies are so different.
They've got something better working right.
Yeah.
Because the team is bigger, the funding's bigger, or they just got it right.
Yeah, it's like me, but it's like us being in a 50cc moped against guys in the superbikes. You're not going to be able to be as quick as them. So
how frustrating is that when they're just blowing by you and you're like, I know I'm a better driver?
But you have to be realistic. I was lucky to be in Formula 1. I was still on track with these world champions, and we had our good days and bad days, and so I was lucky to even have the chance. But there's more to life than Formula 1. There's other places where you can make a name and enjoy racing. So I'm not writing off Formula 1, but I think I started doing a bit of racing in America this year, and we all know that America is a good place to making dreams come true. And they're very welcoming over there. The racing is very competitive, but they'll help you make a living out of it. The sponsors love coming behind you and supporting you the whole way. The fans out there are incredible. It's a different different sort of type of motorsport that I've been used to, but it's very enjoyable, and so I'm looking to do that next year, but nothing's signed as yet.
Okay, and in America, it's IndyCar racing. So that's oval track.
Yeah.
So you're going from, I'm going to throw this thing out. You're going from, say, Monaco F1,
Yeah.
races with yachts and champagne, out to Indianapolis, where it's, barbecues and beer.
Yeah.
There's a completely different audiences, right? What's that like? The difference between those two?
It is different, and obviously in America you have a race in Long Beach, LA, which is pretty, it's a pretty glamorous race. But then you have like the race I won this year, the Iowa 100, in the middle of nowhere. You're just in the middle of thousands of miles of cornfields, basically. So you do have your good races, and it's the same in Formula One. You have the Monaco Grand Prix, which is to me the best race in the world, and then you go to places. I don't want to give any countries bad names, but Bahrain's a great track, but there's just no one really there watching you. So you have different types of racing, but there is a difference in America. It's the fans know how to have a good time. There's all these massive RVs with big barbecues. You can smell the food sometimes when you drive past. It kind of whiffs up into the helmet, and nice burger. I'll have one of those when I get in.
How much does the crowd affect you when you're racing? Because I think you're in this car, shut off. You're obviously concentrating at the oval track. You're over 200 miles an hour, right? I mean, this is no joke.
No.
How much does the crowd influence you?
Obviously, if it's your home race, it makes a big difference. You can sort of hear them roar you every time you go by. And I had that experience in Silverstone in 2014. I was chasing one of the Caterhams to catch them up, and I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I was in a Formula One car, which is pretty deafeningly loud, but I was in a slow speed corner where the engine wasn't really revving, and I could just see arms in the air in the stadium, or the grandstands on the outside of a corner called Luffield, and I could hear a roar, and I looked, and everyone was there with their flags up because they'd seen me hunting down this other driver, and I got past him, and there was only 3 of us British drivers on the grid at the time: me, Lewis, and Jensen. And so that empowered me to then keep pushing and try and catch the next car. So the crowds can make a difference. I haven't experienced that yet in America, but the Indianapolis 500, which is the biggest oval race in the world, is 2.5 miles, an average of 225, 230 miles an hour. I can imagine that being electric. They have 500,000 people there watching the race live. It's the biggest sporting arena in the world.
Yeah.
I can imagine that's a pretty electrifying, what's the word? Sort of place to be.
Yeah, I used to watch that as a kid, and don't ask me why, because it's 2.5 mile track, 200 laps, 500 miles. It's in Indianapolis, like you said, 500,000 people there at a live event. Who's ever heard of anything like that? And I remember being fascinated as a kid. It's very high tech, talking about shaving seconds. Yeah. There's crashes. It's dangerous. It's a big race.
It is a big race. I don't know if I'm going to take part in it yet, but I'd hope to do it at least once in my life. It's one of those races which it just it sucks you in. You want to have a go at it. I had my first oval experience this year, and it was terrifying. But you get used to it. And my second race, I won, and that was a big thing for a European driver to do, because ovals is very un-European, shall I say, because we don't have them. But I was talking about fine detail in F1. There's fine detail in F1, but then there's fine detail in the Indianapolis 500, because you can change the angle of your wing by the smallest of measurements, and you can fill that out on the track, because the car is so on the edge going into these corners where you're trying to keep it flat at 230 miles an hour. It's an amazing feeling.
It's so much faster than the Formula One races.
At Monza, or actually new to Formula One this year, was Mexico, and they were hitting 228 miles an hour. Indianapolis 500, they hit 230, 235. So actually there's only about 6 or 7 miles in it, miles an hour difference in it. But the difference is F1 are doing that for a matter of seconds in a straight line, then brake. Their Indy cars are doing it, as an average, basically for 500 miles,
2 or 3 hours
in a corner. Yeah. With other cars below your, on your high
G-forces.
side, and the G-force. So it's very different, even though you're doing similar speeds.
Okay. Do you worry about crashing?
Yes, but you have to, you worry about it at times, but you put your helmet on, you have to just get rid of that, because there's no point in being worried and going out on track. You've just got to put that helmet on and forget about it. You know, IndyCar's not great for that, for sure. But your time's up when your time's up. You can. There's some silly things you can do as well, and I like to think I'm quite sensible. But everyone makes mistakes at a time. So hopefully, you know, touch wood, I don't have a big one, because I've always been pretty lucky with that.
Silly things, as in you can make the move that hurts you. Because
Yeah,
you're being too aggressive or not being careful enough, or.
Yeah, some people don't think about things too much, and there's a point where great racing drivers just get the move done. But some people go for moves which, you know, there's not even a gap there, and it's just going to end up being a crash. There's certain people in Formula 1, without mentioning any names, who are just known for crashing because they sort of just do silly things. But you can't really get away with doing that on ovals because they're so much faster, and yeah, you just have to think about things. But I like to think I think about my moves, and you know, I'll plan it. I'll be following someone for lap after lap, and I go, right, this is my time, I'll get it done. And if you do it that way, it's the best way to do it.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because in the movie Rush, you know, there's a point where the character, is it James Hunt, right?
Yeah.
Who, you know, striking resemblance to you a little bit. Do you get compared to him at all?
No, but I've been spending quite a lot of time with his son Freddie,
Okay.
and he's like the mirror image of him. It's,
Really?
you know, when he puts, you know, James's old suits on, he's got the long wavy hair, he smokes as well. He's just, you know, spitting image. So I sort of feel like I know James, but I don't.
Okay. Well, in the movie, he's the good-looking English young racer, brash, and you know, he's out there taking chances, and you know, upsetting some other drivers by what he's doing. And you know, he's like, look, I'm the reason people like race car drivers is because we put our lives on the line every day. Is that what racing's really like, or is that the Hollywood version of what racing is?
I'd say that's more of what the Hollywood type is. You know, you do some outlandish moves sometimes, and it was definitely putting your life on your line more back then, for sure, because the safety has increased hugely. And so yeah, it was slightly different back then. But when you were speaking about the movies earlier, I didn't get to have the chance to say, but the best movie for me for racing is the Senna movie,
Okay.
because it's not really a movie, it's a documentary,
Yeah.
and it shows firsthand how it actually is. When you go into films like Rush or Days of Thunder, they've always got an extra gear. And a racing car, yeah, you might have an extra gear, but if you go too early, you're just going to, you know, reduce your revs, and then the other car's going to pull away. So it's, you know, it's very hard to get that overtake done. You can't go, whoa, like, let's go down again, let's overtake and go around the outside. Okay. That doesn't happen. So for me, the Senna is the best film to explain how we go about our business.
Okay, and that showed the rivalry between Senna and was it German guy?
Yep, Niki Lauda.
Niki Lauda, and they were arguing over similar things. You know, you're being too aggressive. You're going for gaps that aren't there. You're ruining things for me. It's just you're missing an etiquette that must be out there when you race in the same track, right?
Yeah, you've got to think about things, and you know, at the end of the day, you've got quite a big grid of young drivers that all want to do well. You know, if you're being overtaken, you defend, and you've got a guy that wants to overtake. Sometimes it ends up with a crash, and you're both out the race. And you can disagree for the rest of your life whose fault it was, but that's going to happen. You can sense how other drivers are going to work, though. There's certain drivers that you go, oh no, I know he's going to shut the door on me, I'm going to have to get past him in a straight line. Or there's drivers which sort of let you go down the inside pretty easily, but they do it purposely because they want you to brake late, go deep, and they'll get you back on the exit. So everyone races differently, and this goes back to the racecraft I was telling you about earlier. A lot of the moves done in Formula 1 now, I can guarantee they were replicating similar back in the day when they were 10 years old in karting, because everyone has their own style of driving. It's like seeing a Tiger Woods swing compared to a Jim Furyk. They're completely different, but they've been the same for the last 20 years, basically.
Okay. Back to the movie Rush. What is your life when you're off the track? Is it all glamour? Is it popping bottles? Is it supermodels? Is it private jets? You can tell me.
Oh, I'd like to think my girlfriend's a supermodel. She's pretty gorgeous, so I'm lucky on that side. Yeah, you have some good nights out in Formula 1. The thing is, you're very busy in Formula 1, but there's certain events like Monaco after the race. It's just the best place in the world to go out. It's electrifying. I thought Austin in America was always a great place to have a good night out. And so yeah, I have a few big nights in the year, but realistically, at the end of the day, we're athletes, and athletes can't get away with just constantly necking the beers and having late nights, which comes across in the movie Rush, which they might have done back then, but it is changed now. You just can't get away with doing stuff like that.
Talk to me about the training. I don't think most people understand the training you have to do as a driver, even like the Indy guys, like the G-forces, the length. I mean, what's an Indy car race? It's hours, right?
Yeah, it's 500 miles doing, well, if there was no yellows, so you don't have to slow down, 230 miles an hour, it's going to be just over 2 hours.
Right.
But it ends up being about 3 hours with the yellows.
Right. So you're sweating, it's in the heat. You had a race recently where it's going to be 2 hours in the heat, G-forces, stress levels. How do you train for that?
Yeah, you're right. It's difficult, and this is the one thing with motorsport people don't really understand, is they don't understand why we need to be fit, because they think at the end of the day they get in their road car in the morning with their suit on, they put the seatbelt across, start the key, off they go, first gear, and it's not physical. But when you add another 200 miles an hour to that, you're doing it in a cockpit where you can hardly move, you're doing it in a country which is really hot, humid, you've got an engine behind you with brakes that are like 800 degrees and an engine which is at 200 degrees, you know, soaking through to your cockpit, so you're boiling hot. You've got 5 layers of fireproof underwear and overalls on. You've got the concentration of driving. You're in control of this machine. You're not on a computer game where if you crash you just, you know, click restart and off you go. You're in control of this. You've got the added pressure that you're being watched by a lot of the world. You're also trying your best to perfect things, and all these things put together, put your heart rate right up, so you're working really hard, you're sweating a lot. You can sweat 2-3 kilos in a race. And I remember I had a heart rate belt on for the Singapore Grand Prix, which realistically is why every driver in Formula 1 trains. Yes, a lot of the races are hard, but the Singapore Grand Prix is the hardest one. Everyone would admit that. And so that's why everyone trains. It's hot, it's humid, it's a street race, so the average speed is slower, so it takes longer to do the distance, so the race is always 2 hours basically. It's in a city, so it's weird. Even you wouldn't think it makes a difference, but in a city where the walls are concrete walls, there's no sort of fresh air. Whatever air you get is hot, and it is just the hardest race. You get out and you're absolutely depleted. And when you get out of the car after most races, everyone is trying to play it cool. They, you know, wipe the sweat off their face and, you know, go onto the weighing scales, chat to your fitness trainer, and off you go back and meet the team. And they're trying to play it cool. After the Singapore Grand Prix, no one gives a flying what's it. They're just on the floor, pouring water over them, trying to soak up as much energy as they can, because it just exhausts you.
When you're 90 minutes into that race, do you get into a zone in your head where you're just kind of meditating or so focused that you can try to forget about some of that stuff?
I'm not really one for meditating, but I've always been a bit sort of sort of a bit blind to the fact that sports psychologists work. I should have started them younger, but what I learned is it's not them trying to hypnotise you and putting you into this place which doesn't really exist. It's more a method of being organised and being, you know, routine. The best racing driver might not necessarily be the quickest on each lap, every lap. It will be, well, I'll say that again. It's not necessarily he can put a quick time in but then a slow time. It's being consistently fast. So if it's a 50-lap Grand Prix, he can try and mirror image that lap every single time and not make a mistake. Whilst you have other cars around you, you know, it might start raining and each corner has different grip levels. That's the hardest thing. And with a sports psychologist, they can put you into a place where you have sort of resets. And I started using one and it made a difference. And I had a place, not always the start-finish line, but most of the time I'd come across the start-finish line and I'd forget everything I've just done and then do it again. And it was like a reset point, and it made things go quicker and it made me more focused. If you just get into a rhythm's good, but if you get into a rhythm, you can very quickly lose concentration. Then, you know, make a mistake in a Formula 1 car, your race is over. And there's certain procedures you can do at the start of the race to get yourself into a relaxed environment and just blank everything out. So there's definitely, you know, bonuses to having sports psychologists, which I can see helps other sportsmen.
Okay, but you don't meditate per se.
No.
But you do get yourself into a state before you go in there.
Yeah.
Okay.
I try to focus, and I do. It depends what you call meditation. I don't sit there in the morning with my legs crossed going. I can shut my eyes and lie in bed and try and replicate a lap. If I'm, you know, racing at Spa in Belgium in a week's time, I'll wake up every morning, shut my eyes, try and image me braking, doing the gears, turning in each corner. And if I do this 10 times every morning for a week, I can guarantee if you timed me on one of my laps when I wake up on like a Friday, I will be within a second of the lap I'm going to do. It takes a bit of practice, but you can pretty much mirror image the lap in your head.
So you can rehearse that thing in real time in your head.
And that goes back to helping what I said earlier. Motorsport's a very weird thing for actually having a chance to practice what you do. And so this way, you make the most of being rehearsed, organised and prepared to get in the car and then do it. Instead of getting in the car, doing 10 laps, trying to learn where to turn and do your brakes, do your gears. You now do it on a simulator, try and perfect it there. Then you come away from the simulator, try and practice it in your head so it's there. And then when you get in the car, your body can do it straight away, first lap, instead of waiting 10 laps to learn it all.
Right. Sounds like Hollywood. Sounds like making a movie. You like practice, and then the day of you got one take.
Yeah, practice makes perfect. Everyone knows that. There's one guy out there that says 10,000 hours it takes to be the ultimate sportsman. You've probably heard that before.
Yeah. Do you believe that?
In motorsport, that's impossible. I don't think there's any driver in motorsport that's done 10,000 in the same car, on the same track. The thing is, we have different tracks. It's not like going on a tennis court, which is exactly the same size. We're going on tracks which are so different lengths, different corners, different, hills, and it's so much to throw in the boat with motorsport. It's impossible to be 10,000 hours practiced. Right.
So just go with the time you have, meditate in the other times.
Make the most of what you have, and then take that up and put it into the car.
Right. It's interesting when you've been described as being a bit OCD, obsessive compulsive, but you say that's an asset for me because that means you are the one that's doing all of those little checks. I used to fly helicopters, and you have a checklist, and you go around that thing, and you check everything, or you fall out of the sky. Yeah. And you're happy to be on the OCD spectrum in that standpoint. Yeah. How do you find your piece helps you as far as OCD?
I think it really helps me. And day to day, it frustrates me because there's certain things I just have to do because I can't go out of the house until I've done it. Or, I have a certain procedure. It takes me about 10 minutes to have a shower because it's a certain way I get in and a certain way I get out of the shower and all this sort of stuff. But when it comes to it, realistically, my life is very organised. And I don't spend time going, looking for things or being unprepared. Everything has a place. I can relax because I know everything's sorted. And it's the same when I go to motorsport. I go to the track. Everything's in its place, it's all ready. I'm never going, where's my earpieces, trying to get into the car and I haven't got my earpieces to hear my engineer. It's all ready, it's all organised. It's the same with the preparation. I'll do the simulator, I'll come back, I'll write my notes, and then when I wake up every morning, I'll make sure I practice the lap 10 times in my head, so it's there, fresh in my mind, to then when I go to the track. And it's all these different things. Organisation can never hurt you, I don't think. Yeah. And it makes you enjoy life. It's the same when you get in your aeroplane chair, that you get some people that have all the magazines wedged down their side, a pillow sort of in between their legs, bags here, drinks falling over. And I couldn't relax like that. To me, you've got to have as much space as you can to relax. Everything has a place. You have your iPad on your lap and your earpieces and you're done. I can't relax until everything has its own place and is sorted, basically.
And have you had races where you've shown up and it's been chaotic and races where you've shown up and everything is smooth? And are you a different driver?
Yeah. The annoying thing is you can't always put your finger on why you have a good weekend. In GP2, I'd have a weekend where I put it on pole position and I'd win, and then I'd go to the next race and I'd work even harder and I'd qualify 10th and I'd finish 7th. You can't work out week to week what you've done different. So that is frustrating. But the main thing is you be prepared and you give your 100% all the time, because that's an asset.
I like how that mental reset in your brain, that's a really interesting way of thinking about how you race. And I bet people listening could apply that to different parts of their life. And it's a mental discipline. Because like you said, it could just get routine and then you're going to make a mistake on lap 17 because you're not paying attention. But if you reset and treat each new lap as a new game, then you stay focused, you try to perfect each one. You're not thinking about 3 laps ago when you did this wrong. And that's a way to win.
It does take practice for sure. You can't... because rhythm is a good thing. In all sport, rhythm is good. But you can't get into an conscious rhythm where you start then not being alert and making mistakes. I also got taught this thing called the monkey mind, where, everyone has doubts. There'll be someone in the back of your head now saying, I wish that I asked that question differently. The best thing you can do is you can't change that. You picture throwing out the back of your head. And so I pictured, when my psychologist told me about this monkey mind, he said, listen to what it's saying, picture it being bagged up and then being thrown out the exhaust pipe, and it's, you know, it's hitting the cars behind you. You can't do anything about it. It's happened. Move on and focus on what's in front of you. And when I started doing that, I started winning races, and it really helped.
That's wild. Do you have more to do, you think, from a psychology standpoint in your future to win? Is that something you want to keep working on?
Yeah, you can never stop. You can never be perfect. You can always just get better and better and better. And so, yeah, I won't ever give up on trying to be a better person. And I practiced my monkey mind thing when it comes to golf. I used to play a lot. I can't play as much now because I seem to always be on an aeroplane or in a racing car. But, you know, it goes back to the thing, golf is 90% mental. And the best thing you can do, everyone hits bad shots, but the worst thing you can do is picture the last shot in your head when you're taking the next shot, because you'll just mirror image it. You've got to put it out of your mind, and that's what Tiger Woods was the best at. He hit a bad shot, he'd completely forgotten about it, and then he hit a perfect shot.
Right, so if you can do that, you can take that over to your racing as well, and just stay present, really.
Everyone makes mistakes, no one's perfect.
When back to just Lewis Hamilton, when you see him as a personal brand, do you ever think, okay, you know, it's his personal brand that also gets him the sponsorships and gets him at the top and these kind of things? I mean, do you see that from your own personal perspective, that you have to build, you know, the brand Max, and then that also gets you the cars? I mean, it's a whole different way than it was, say, during the Rush years 30 years ago, where you would just really rely on the brand. To watch the rest of this fascinating interview, click on the link below and go to LondonRealAcademy.com. There you can sign in with your social media, log in and watch the rest of the episode for free, along with all of our episodes on London Real, my webinars, and all of our premium content, all located over at LondonRealAcademy.com. So click on the link below, you'll be directed there, and you can watch the rest of this fascinating interview, and I'll see you there.